Hello. So I said a while ago that I was going to be recording my cursed childhood writing. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm hoping the visual quality is better, I hope. I mean, I will check after I finish recording, it might still be terrible. But the sound quality, I still haven't got a microphone, a proper one. Still using the headset, so apologies for that. But yes, I'm going to be reading it. And before I start, I just want to apologise. um, it's really bad. I said this before, and I'm saying it again. This story is very bad. And not only is it bad, but it's very problematic. Could be potentially offensive, so if you're easily offended, probably don't watch it. I mean, remember I was 12 when I wrote this. And yeah, I'm pretty sure my parents would be horrified when I was 12 if they knew that I'd written this. It's basically, you can tell the people are villains in this because they swear constantly. They smoke. They're insanely abusive. I feel like I must have thought this is what teenagers do, like the whole time I was writing it, because I've written it about a teenager, and I must have been like, teenagers do this, don't they? And I just wrote it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I am apologising before I read this, because not only is it really bad, but it is problematic. It's also meant to be a horror, which you'll be able to tell, because the main character is constantly terrified, even when there's nothing to be terrified about. Yeah, it's really bad. So I am just warning you before I start reading this that it's pretty bad. I've got my wine. I'm gonna need it. Okay, the title is A Kiss from the Devil. Part 1. Oh yes. There are 3 parts to this story, although part 1 is actually like epically longer than part 2 and 3 combined. And I don't know if I'm going to be reading part 1 and then doing 2 and 3 in a separate video. Sorry, the dogs are going mad. Or whether I'm going to read it all at once. I'm going to wait and see how long it takes me to read part 1. And then, yeah, apologies for that dog. She's very insane. She's completely mad. Okay. Ori? Calm down, please. Bailey's telling her off. Hey. Okay. Come on, Grace. It's just a bit of fun. Nobody's going to get hurt, he said to her, practically begging. No, Byron. How many times do I have to say it? She looked at him with big blue pleading eyes. Why not? He asked in a frustrated tone. Because I don't want to. She was annoyed now. You can still go, though. Oliver, Abby, Sean and Jessica are going. It's not as if you'll be alone, she spoke softly. But I want you there, he said to her with a smile, because I love you. She smiled back at him. Okay, you've got me. I'll come, she said, hugging him goodnight and closing the door behind her. The next morning, the minibus came to pick her up. It was Oliver's dad's, and Grace was surprised that he had let Oliver borrow it. It wasn't the most attractive minibus, big, white and shabby looking really, but at least it worked. This is another thing, I don't know why it's a minibus. Like, why couldn't they just use a regular car? It's so weird. This whole thing is just like completely bizarre. Grace got in beside Jessica and Abby, and the engine started. Are you excited, Grace? Abby asked with a grin on her face. Grace was amazed at Abby's beauty. She was the best looking and most popular girl in the school. She had this long, dark hair, which was in such good condition it was practically a mirror, and big brown sparkling eyes, and a perfect figure. She was just ... perfect. Grace nodded at Abby's question, but she wasn't sure that she really was all that excited. She could feel a leap in the pits of her stomach, but she was fairly certain that it was nothing more than pure and absolute fear. "Shall we put some music on?" Sean yelled back to the girls. Grace thought Sean was so sweet. He was fair-haired with blue eyes, and she'd been friends with him since they were 8 years old, when everybody used to think that they were brother and sister. His girlfriend, Jessica, handed a CD to the boys and they put it on. She had blue eyes too, and long ginger hair, very pretty really, although she didn't like to think so because she was such a tomboy. Music started booming out. It was supposed to be a compilation CD, but it was mostly Snoop Dogg and Puff Daddy. And 2 hours later, they all stepped out into the woods. The trees covered the sun, turning day into night, and there it was, huge, creepy, and looming tall ahead of them. Thordash Manor. "Wow, look at that," Sean said with a smile spread across his face. "Come on then." Oliver began to push open the big iron gates, and Byron came over to help him. Byron was Grace's boyfriend. He was very good looking. He had big brown eyes, ruffled black hair, and a great body. Grace didn't really know Oliver. She knew he was going out with Abby and that he was a great footballer, and that he was Byron's best mate. But that was all really. That's the only thing you need to know about him, apparently. They all started walking up the twisty driveway until they reached the door. "Are you sure nobody lives here?" Jessica asked. "Yes, positive," Oliver answered, beginning to shove the door. "Oh, good." Jessica sounded reassured by this. "I'm cold. I don't like it here," Grace said with a slight shiver. "Oh, baby." Byron came and put his arms around her. He was so much taller than her. She could feel his chin brushing the top of her head. Grace felt so afraid here in the middle of the forest, outside a creepy old house so far from home, and the only person she knew properly was Sean. He had been in her class as long as she could remember, and they were both 14, but the rest were all in the year above. Okay, just want to point out, in the UK, you're not allowed to drive until you're 18, so not only did his dad lend them a minibus, which is completely random, but it's completely illegal for them to drive it as well. Sure, she had Byron. She was going out with him and she liked him, but she didn't know him. Not really. Bang! The door flew open, and the noise echoed through the whole house, sounding like a million laughs of the dead, mocking them, knowing that they were invisible to the group of friends, knowing that they could watch them at all times and punish them for interrupting their ghostly silence. Jessica took a bunch of candles and lit them all around the house. She had 4 lamps, so they left one in the main room whilst they went off in twos to explore the building that they would be spending the weekend in. Grace went off up the stairs with Byron. He kept an arm around her waist. Her fear was so strong it could be sensed by anybody, or indeed anything. As they were ascending the stairs, Grace noticed that the reason it was so dark was because the windows had all been boarded up, and the eerie green floral wallpaper was very vague, but could just be made out in the dull glow of the lamp in Byron's outstretched hand. "Byron, why are all the windows boarded up?" Grace asked, trying to sound casual, but even so, hearing the quiver in her voice that was hard to miss. "To stop people getting in, I guess," Byron said, and even though she didn't look at him, Grace could tell that he was shrugging as he spoke. Then the thought broke its way into her mind: to stop people getting in or to stop people getting out. She fought the thoughts away and stood close to Byron as he put a hand on the doorknob and turned. She was glad Byron was here. He was tough and strong. She felt safe with him. She knew that he would protect her. Inside was a very bare room. There was a slight crack in the board that was nailed over the window, and light poured in. The bed was a four-poster and looked freshly made, and the walls were yellowy green. "Shall we tell the others what we want this room?" Byron nudged Grace with a grin. "Okay," Grace spoke, not really caring too much. Byron went out of the room, calling down the stairs, with his echo muffling his voice. "We're in this room." Soon they were all sitting in the main room again. Jessica, Oliver and Sean were all eating what smelled like smoky bacon crisps, and the others were all smoking and drinking from bottles of alcohol that were on the coffee table, and there must have been at least a dozen. I think I didn't actually know any names of proper alcohol, so I just wrote bottles of alcohol. That's quite funny. "I say we pull the boards off of the windows. It's far too dark and dingy in here," Abby said, rising to her feet and looking around the dark room that was lit by a few candles. "Okay, I agree." Jessica stood and took Abby by the arm, and they made their way to a window and began prising the boards from the windows. "What the—" Sean cut himself off. His voice sounded angry. "We can't just break into somebody's house and start pulling boards off their windows. They might be there for a reason," he continued. Oliver started to laugh mockingly at Sean, and then began to help Jess and Abby. In the end, everybody was helping, and 2 hours later, the house was bright with the light of the dying sun. Soon it was dark again and very cold, with all of the air coming through in so many broken windows. Grace huddled close to Byron. She could just make out his smile in the darkness, sympathetic and compassionate. His arms hugged her, keeping her warm and making her feel safe. She could hear the gentle breathing of Jessica and Sean as they slept, and she could hear Oliver and Abby kissing. Byron seemed to hear this also, and as he is very competitive, he leant over and began to kiss Grace. His kiss was so different to his smile. His kiss was fierce and even a little aggressive. But Grace enjoyed it. Oh my god. I was a strange child. "Grace, do you want to, he asked in the quietest whisper. "No, I don't think so," Grace whispered back in shock. "Why not?" Byron put a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Because I'm not ready yet," Grace answered. Byron took his hand away from Grace. "When are you going to be ready, Grace?" "Huh? When?" He was still whispering, but it was more of a hissing now. "Why did you come here, Grace? If you don't want to be with me, then what the fuck are we doing here?" He rose to his feet now. She could feel him pacing around angrily. "I didn't come here to do it, Byron." Oh my god. "I came here because you said we would spend the weekend together." Grace's voice shook tearfully. "Look, Grace, this isn't going to work. Should we just be friends from here on?" "But I love you," she stammered, and then she started to cry. "I know you love me, Grace. I love you too. But we can't be together. We want such different things," he said with a smile. "You want to get your leg over, you mean?" Grace hissed, turning over in her sleeping bag and looking out of the window. Then she saw it, the white figure outside in the garden, walking towards the house and shaking its head. It was a girl, around 25 years of age, long dark hair, a pale face, and a white gown. She turned then and looked right at Grace. She pointed her finger, and Grace noticed the pain and fear in the girl's eyes. Then she felt her own fear erupt as she let out a deafening scream. "Grace, what is it?" Byron lit a lamp and then pulled out some candles, lighting up the whole room. He looked at Grace standing by the window, shivering with fear and the coldness. "What the fuck's going on?" Oliver stood up and looked at Grace in disbelief. "What's going on?" he repeated, looking into Grace's scared eyes. "There was somebody outside," Grace stammered. "Oh no!" Abby put her hands on her face. and Sean and Jessica rose to their feet. Where? I don't see anybody. Oliver walked to the window, scanning outside surroundings. I can't see anything, he said, leaving the room and going into the garden, followed closely by Jessica, Abby and Sean. Byron came and put his arm around Grace. Gracie, 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 he muttered in a sing-song voice. A few minutes later, Oliver burst into the room and grabbed Grace by the wrist. There's nobody out there, he said, prying her away from Byron. Did you make it up? He yelled in anger. No, of course I didn't. He shook his head. You fucking crazy bitch. And I thought you were one of the decent ones. He let go of her, still shaking his head. Oliver, I'm telling the truth. Please listen to me. He looked at her, a smile forming on his face. I thought you, Byron and Abby... I thought you... There we go, where are we? I thought you, Byron and Abby would be fine. I mean, I'd expect this from Sean. Sean's a bit weird, a bit of a sissy, some might say. But you, I didn't know you, but Byron said that you were cool. I never thought you would cause any trouble, but no, I was wrong. Bang! It was the door. Somebody was knocking on the door. The six of them looked at one another, and then Oliver, Jess and Byron went to open it, and Sean stayed with Abby and Grace, who was shaking with fear. A few seconds later, they all came back. Grace, Oliver said, it's for you. Grace stood up. What? Who is it? She asked, looking at the three of them as they shrugged their shoulders. Grace walked towards the door, and there, shivering on the doorstep, was the woman she had seen outside earlier. She was older than she had looked before, a lot older, and she still had that eerie feel about her. Grace, she said in a soft, kind voice. Yes, who are you? What do you want? Grace looked as the woman's gentle smile faded. Why did you take the boards from the windows, Grace? You shouldn't have done that. They were there for protection, to stop things from getting in, or indeed, getting out. Grace felt her blood run cold in her veins. And Byron, don't do it with him. You don't want to end up like me, Grace. Byron is not the right one for you. You know it deep down. Grace felt afraid now. I love him, she stammered. I want to make him happy. The woman frowned. It isn't love, Grace. Not real love. I can tell real love when I see it. He doesn't love you. Sorry, but it's true. The woman smiled. Just be careful, Grace. Those you love will hurt you mentally and physically. They will betray you. Remember that, Grace. Please, Grace, be careful. Goodbye. Grace didn't speak. She just watched as the woman seemed to drift down the path and then melt away into the night. Who was that, Grace? Byron came to her, noticing her fear. I don't know. She just told me to be careful. Oliver and Byron both burst out laughing. Come on, let's get some sleep, Jess said, getting back into bed. Yeah, this ghost wandering around outside, and they're just like, let's go to sleep. Jess, Sean, Grace spoke. Yes, Jess and Sean both answered in union. Can I sleep with you tonight? Unless you want to, well, you know. Sean started to laugh, pulling the covers back. We don't do that, Jess smiled. We're waiting until we're ready. Oh, how sweet. If only everybody were as sweet as you, Grace said loudly, looking at Byron, who was sitting on his bed watching her, and she got into the bed beside Sean. They weren't really beds, just a load of pillows, duvets and sleeping bags on the floor. Grace, you know you can still sleep here with me, Byron spoke as he turned off the lamp beside his bed. No, I prefer it here, thank you, Grace said sternly. Why aren't you sleeping with Byron then, Grace? Abby looked at her, the faint glow of the lamp clearly showing her face. He doesn't want to be with me anymore because I won't do it with him, Grace answered. Jesus, this is so bad. Sean sat up looking at Byron in disgust. He really hated those other two boys. Byron, you're such a self-centered wanker sometimes. Do you know that? Byron sat up now, looking at all of the angry eyes surveying him. He began scrabbling about until he finally found a lighter and lit his lamp. Then he took a fag from his bag and lit it from the lamp. He took a long drag of his cigarette and breathed out smoke in the dimly lit room. Oliver sat up too, and he too lit a cigarette. And the pair of them sat there gossiping and smoking like a chimney. Grace felt like crying. Just F you. Grace got into the cupboard and closed her eyes, trying to sleep. She woke with Abby crying really loudly and Byron's voice close to her. Shit, what the fuck happened? It was that crazy bitch last night at the door. That's what it was. Grace opened her eyes. At first she thought it was still night because of the darkness, until she looked at the windows. They were all boarded up, like they were when they had first arrived, and the only light was from the lamp that had been burning all night and was nearly out. What happened? She asked in bewilderment. Who put the boards back up? Sean looked at her uneasily. The door's boarded up too, he said, and a scared tremble was in his voice. Oh my God, so we're stuck. Where's Oliver and Jess? Sean looked down at the ground. They're trying to take the boards from the windows and doors, but it won't work, and so they're looking for another way out. Grace could feel a knot in her throat. Oh my God, Sean, what's going to happen? She could hold it in no longer, and she began to cry. Byron came over to comfort her, but Sean blocked his way. Look, Byron, she doesn't need you upsetting her even more. Just leave her alone, will you? Byron began to laugh. Who's going to stop me, huh? You? He was laughing really hard now. He pushed Sean aside and knelt beside Grace. Are you okay? Grace didn't answer. She just looked down at the ground, not wanting to answer him, yet longing for him to put his strong arms around her like he used to when he was her boyfriend, which was literally like 5 minutes ago. We can be friends, can't we? He asked, putting his hand on her arm. I really like you, Grace. I don't want you to hate me. Please be my friend. Grace nodded her head and then let Byron hold her in his arms as she cried out all of her pain and fear. We can do it if you want to, she whispered. He looked back at her. You're not ready, Grace. I'm not going to do it with you just because you want to stay with me. He stood up. Okay, you're lost, Grace said as he walked away. He turned and gave her a cheeky grin. We'll talk about it later, he smiled. I mean, remember, these guys are supposed to be 14. This is so wrong. Like, seriously. But, like, when I was 12, I obviously thought 14 wasn't... This is what 14-year-olds did. I'm so sorry. This is so bad. Okay. Jessica and Sean entered the room. There's no fucking way out. Oliver kicked one of the boards with anger. Abby moved next to Grace, and they both cried in an endless fear. Endless. You two, shut the fuck up for 1 second, Oliver yelled. You're not helping, okay? You're just annoying all of us. Abby shut up, but Grace couldn't. She tried and tried, but the tears kept coming. Soon she'd be like a dried up grape. A raisin. Grace, I'm warning you, Oliver said in a low voice, trying to sound calm. But Grace continued to cry, so Oliver grabbed her by the arm and pulled her up the stairs. Oliver, what are you doing? Let go of her. You're scaring her. Sean yelled. Byron, aren't you going to stop him? I thought you loved her, so aren't you going to help her? Sean looked hurt. He won't hurt her, Byron said, stubbing his cigarette out on the wall beside him. Abby looked down at the ground, fighting back the tears that were rolling down her cheeks. Jessica rushed towards Abby and hugged her tightly. Don't cry, Abby. Don't let Oliver get to you. He's really not that bad. Abby found this really funny and didn't stop laughing until Sean's voice broke out loud and angry. Byron, aren't you going to do anything, or should I go? Byron smiled and breathed out smoke through his nose all over Sean, and Sean began up the stairs, but Byron stopped him. She's my girlfriend. I'll help her if I think she needs it. Now fuck off out of our business. Let go of me, Grace snarled as Oliver grabbed her hair and flung her into a room. It was a room she recognised, she was sure. Byron and her had been in here on the first day, and he had said that they should stay here. Oliver let go of her and then slapped her face, and she fell on the floor. It's not funny at all. I'm just laughing because I was quite shocked. Sit on the bed, Oliver said, standing against the wall. Grace did as she was told, and sat there as Oliver just stood looking at her crying for at least 10 minutes. I don't know why Byron likes you so much, he finally said, taking his seat beside her. You're making everyone scared, and you're ruining our weekend. So, I can hit you again, so you have something to actually cry about. Or you can kiss me and we can go back to the others, so you can act like a normal human. You see, I told you this was cursed. Like, what the fuck was 12-year-old me thinking? Writing that? It's like proper, like, wrong. I'm quite shocked. I was so shocked when I read this back, honestly. Oliver, Grace rose to her feet, looking in shock at Oliver, who rose from the bed now. Grace, how are you going to make Byron happy if you can't even kiss the boy properly? I can tack you, Grace. Now sit on the bed. Grace could see the anger in his eyes, and it frightened her. You're just going to kiss me, right? No funny business, Grace asked, looking at Oliver, afraid of what he might say, what he might do. I'll kiss you, that's all. Now come and sit on the bed. Oliver sat and gestured for Grace to do the same, so she did. And then she felt Oliver's lips. She imagined they were Byron's. But it was so hard. Byron's kiss was hard and aggressive, whereas Oliver's was so soft. Then she felt Oliver's hand creeping up her leg, and she stood suddenly, and Oliver began laughing. Oliver, what's your problem? Just lay off, will you? She made her way to the door, but Oliver's voice stopped her. This is between the two of us, he said. Grace spun around. Why is that? She asked. Nobody will believe you over me, Oliver chuckled. Well, I'm willing to take my chances, Oliver. Grace opened the door. Byron's my best mate, Grace. He'll believe me over you, and he'll think you're just a lying bitch. Oh my God. Grace, are you okay? Sean put an arm around her. Yes, I'm fine. Why shouldn't I be? Grace looked at the ground. She never lied, and it was really hurting her to do so. He didn't hurt you, did he? Sean continued. No, I'm fine. Grace went and sat by Abby as Oliver came down the stairs. Found a way out yet, Byron? Jess? Anybody? He spoke. No, we're stuck, Ollie. We're really stuck. Byron looked at Grace. Are you okay? He asked. Grace nodded. Do you want to talk about that thing that we were going to talk about? He asked, taking her hand. Later, Grace said with a smile. We'll talk about it later. The day passed quickly. Half of it was spent trying to prise the boards from the windows and doors. The other half was spent talking and boozing. That night, everybody got into their beds. This time, Grace got in with Byron, and he held her how he always used to. But it wasn't a loving hug, it was unfeeling and cold. Grace rolled over away from Byron and closed her eyes. We can do it now if you want to, Grace whispered. I want to, you know that, but the thing is, do you want to? Byron leaned on his elbows, watching Grace. As she closed her eyes and thought, yes, I think I do, she smiled. Are you sure? I thought you weren't ready. He stood up and slipped off his dressing gown. I don't know why he's wearing a dressing gown. I'm not, but I never will be unless somebody makes me ready. Grace sat up and slipped her nightgown off over her head, and then she lay there scared yet excited, wanting yet despising, waiting and yet not really waiting at all, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. And all around the spirits cried out, no, no, you've done it. You didn't listen, and now you're going to end up just like me. And that is the end of part 1. So I'm going to read part 2 and 3 in a separate video. I'll probably do that tomorrow because, yeah, as I said, part 2 and 3 is about the same length as 1. In fact, I think it's shorter than 1. But yeah, doing so I didn't warn you, it's very problematic. I must have been some messed up kid, man. I was so shocked when I first read that, which was like a few weeks ago. I got some of my old stuff and I opened it and I read it and I was like, what the fuck is this? I also have some like stories I wrote when I was really small, like when I was like 6 or 7. So like I might read those at some point because I was quite shocked by some of those as well, to be honest. I think I was a messed up child. But yeah, I will read part 2 and 3 tomorrow and upload that. So I hope you enjoyed my cursed childhood story. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a brilliant night. Goodbye.